Hi there, Jeya. So let's take a look at this new set of essays you've got here. This is about pollution. So let's see what you wrote. Some environmental punditries believe that different spectrum of pollutions could damage astronomically populated cities and its surroundings. In other words, this may result in frequent climate changes and environmental disasters. In this essay, we will discuss the central reason behind the destructions and way to circumvent such issues in detail below. All right, so it's fine. The structure is fine. You've included the information that you need to include, but in a short little paragraph, there were a number of little grammar mistakes, nothing huge, okay? So I should start with that. But also some of the vocabulary was a little too much. In other words, it was vocabulary that just didn't feel natural. So I understand that you're trying to make a good impression on the examiner, and that is very important. But somewhere between, not using any advanced language and then using an extreme amount of advanced language, there's a middle ground there, and that's what I want you to aim for, okay? So, for example, environmental punditries, it's not an expression we would say, okay? And then this was strange, different spectrum of pollutions, and then astronomically populated cities. All right, so this is some of the vocabulary that I would encourage you to revise and just simplify it into expressions that are more natural, that are more native-like. So, for example, as a native speaker, if I were going to write this, the same general idea, I would probably say something like, let's see, some environmental specialists believe that various forms of pollution could damage, or not even could, but they do damage, that various forms of pollution damage our cities and their surroundings. All right, so it's just much simpler and it's much easier to read, but I don't want you to confuse simple with basic and with low level, okay? Sometimes the greatest clarity is achieved with this kind of language. All right, so now let's take a look at some of the grammar. Its surroundings. You can't say that because it's cities and their surroundings. And then here, there's no S after a modal verb, right? Okay, so it may result. And then we don't even say frequent climate changes. We just say climate change. That's it, okay? And then you could have said frequent environmental disasters. That would have been okay. So it's the placement of frequent which is wrong. Then, destruction is usually just in the singular. So you could have just said the central reason behind this destruction and ways to circumvent such issues in detail below. Okay, that was fun. I like that. All right, so we spent a lot of time on your introduction, but I think it's worth it because I want you to really understand what kinds of expressions work and what don't. So let's move on. All right, I can fix this right now. Owing to dense population. Why is it dense? Because you've got a noun here, so you only need an adjective, not an adverb. So, owing to dense population and inadequate living spaces, the government could not allocate a separate location for their residents to dump their daily wastes which they emit. Therefore, they were foisted to throw them on the empty lands or on the streets. Therefore, it remains stagnant above the stratified layers of the soils. Because of its non-decaying characteristics, it might cause perilous diseases for the residents. Furthermore, the carbon emission by the vehicles on the cities are rapidly soaring. It is due to the people's excess usage of vehicles for their daily commotion purposes. For example, in some overpopulated, impoverished nations, the government does not contemplate proper urban planning for their residents' waste decomposition. Okay. As a result, the residents across the cities tend to dump their daily waste on the streets without outlooking the environmental impacts. All right. So, I wanted to read the whole paragraph before I reviewed it and corrected it. So, did you talk about the problems of pollution? Yeah, you did. So, it wants to know what are the reasons are in large cities. And you did talk about them. You talked about how there's no places for residents to leave waste. And then you also talked about carbon emissions from vehicles. You talked about two problems. Let's talk about how you organized the paragraph, okay? Because something there happened that was a little strange. So you talked about this first, okay? You talked about the waste disposal. And then here you start talking about carbon emissions, okay? But then your example didn't talk about that at all. Your example talked about this whole thing about waste again, which felt really strange for me. So you had this idea here which was unsupported, okay? And then here you went back to your previous argument. So for me, this is incorrect. If you have things to say about waste disposal, those should all go together, okay? But then you absolutely need to support this too. You can't just leave it sitting there by itself, all right? And then the end of your paragraph had again this thing about waste. So you really developed the whole idea of waste, but you didn't develop at all the whole thing about carbon emissions. Look, here, let's see, you've just got one sentence. That's it. Okay? But you needed to talk more about this because it talked about the problems of pollution, not the problem, one problem. And you mentioned a second problem, but you needed to go further into detail about it. All right, so that's a little bit about the task achievement portion of this paragraph and the coherence and cohesion. Now we have to look at the grammar and the vocabulary. So, owing to dense population and inadequate living spaces, the government cannot allocate separate locations for their residents to dispose of their waste. Okay? Therefore, they, I didn't like foisted, they have no choice but to throw the waste. We don't call them empty lands. We call them landfills, or just like, I don't know. Therefore, they are forced to discard them basically anywhere they can. Now look what you did here. Therefore. So you could have changed this by saying something like resulting in its remaining on the street level. Or you could have just changed the grammar around so that you didn't have to use this therefore twice. You could have used a participle here like an ing. That would have been nice too. All right? Then we don't start sentences with because. All right? You could have said, due to its non-decaying characteristics, it might cause perilous diseases for the residents. Okay? Now this wasn't a furthermore. Then you could have also, instead of a furthermore, just implies that you're going to continue talking about the same sort of thing, but you're not. You're actually switching gears here, talking about something else. So it should have been maybe like another problem worth mentioning is the carbon emissions by vehicles. Okay, another problem worth mentioning is the carbon emissions by vehicles which are rapidly soaring. Full stop. This is due to an excessive number of people using their vehicles for their daily commute. Okay? But again, you still should have said a little more about that. Then, like I said, this should have gone back over here with this whole thing about waste. For example, in some overpopulated, impoverished nations, the government does not contemplate proper urban planning, but the government does not, or how about this? The government has not provided proper urban planning for their residents, apostrophe. You can't say waste decomposition. You'd have to say waste disposal, basically. As a result, the residents across the cities tend to dump their daily waste on the streets. You already said all of that before. I mean, it's very similar to what you said here. So, I would have actually gotten rid of all of this. Like I said, I would have said a little more about this. And then I would have gotten rid of this. And then I would have just had a conclusive statement that really linked both of those ideas together. Something like, therefore, let's see, poor waste disposal and fumes emitted into the atmosphere are two of the main problems facing the environment today. All right, so let's move on. Get rid of the here. Governments could pursue, as a verb with an E, not IT, international smoke emission regimes. I don't know what a smoke emission regime. You don't mean that. You don't mean smoke. You mean something else. And impose all the vehicle owners to maintain valid certifications. However, if they were insistent to abide, this is the wrong word. If they refused to abide by the regulations, the authorities could deduce offenders, apostrophe, license grades, and penalize them with heavy fines for impacting the environment. In addition, the government could surrogates superannuated method of decomposing methodologies such as background burnings. Okay, I don't understand what that means. It's the vocabulary here. I have no idea what you're trying to say with this. The only thing I understand is that people burn things in their backyards and the government needs to do something about it. Alternatively, they could install electronic decomposers on the city outskirts by adjoining with the biogas plants. As a result, while burning whom? Under extreme temperature, the abstracted energy could be supplied for the residential purposes. For instance, in major well-developed countries, the government runs biogas power plants outside the cities. The main commodity for producing this power is acquired from the local residences' daily wastes, singular. You need an apostrophe here. Therefore, the generated power, singular, is transmitted for the usage of local residents. Okay, so again, I did the same thing because I wanted to read the whole thing through. Now, what you've done here, it got better towards the end of the paragraph, but what you basically did is you didn't create a paragraph in the sense of a paragraph, meaning, a topic sentence, main idea, support, main idea, support. What it read like really was a list, all right? And you don't want that because a list is not a paragraph. So you needed a topic sentence here, essentially introducing this. So something simple like, despite the problems mentioned above, there are solutions that could tackle this, devastating issue. Okay, and then you could say this. So then that was fine. But then here, rather than, look what you did here. It's just this very long sentence. So it's the kind of thing that needs to be divided into two, for sure. All right? And that's a good idea because then you show how what you're suggesting is a solution. All right? It's not enough just to say, look, here's a solution. It's also important to say why it's a solution or how it's a solution. Okay? So, then here I would say full stop, and then this could be a solution as, XYZ. Okay? Then, like I said, I didn't understand this, I'm afraid, all right, at all. So I can't even help you with that. This was good. This you did right here. Okay? Because you said, here's a solution, this is what would happen, and then you even give an example of it. So that was really good. That's what you need to be doing. Okay? So, in terms of grammar, yeah, there were still some issues, and vocabulary, which I already talked about, some of that. like this, the abstracted energy. That's just vocabulary. Let's see. Again, daily waste should be singular. And this should have been singular. Okay, so was it not that bad? All right, let's move on. In conclusion, pollution, singular. Pollution is the major reason for global warming. Okay, so singular, singular. The whole thing should be singular. Everyone should vow themselves to conserve this green environment for future generations, whereas the officialdoms should observe their peoples whether they follow their implemented regimes. Thereby, we could obtain clean environments. All right. Okay, unnatural word here. And they don't observe their people, okay? They need to regulate, essentially. So it's an idea, it's an issue here of using the right words. Okay. All right, we've spent a long time looking at this, so I want to go straight into your task 1 now. Let's see, you're writing for a job. So, dear sir, madam, I am myself, Jeya Vignesh, age 28, and I am writing this letter to apply for the summer indenture program, which is going to take place at your esteemed organization during the month of April 2020. Kindly allow me to explain why I am extremely voracious to participate in this program. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this. First of all, this is an unnatural way of writing. I am myself, and then you say your name. We don't start letters like that. Okay, it's not really a cover letter, but we start basically with the purpose. All right, I am writing this letter to apply for the summer indenture. Is it an internship that you want? We don't really call it indenture. So get rid of all of this here, which just feels really unnatural in English. And then I'm writing this letter to apply for the summer internship program, which is going to take place at your organization. Again, unnatural, esteemed organization. All right, and then voracious was, again, a wrong word here. It's a lovely word, but it's not used like this. We talk about somebody being a voracious reader, but you can't use it here in this context. So, I'm currently studying my... you don't study my undergraduation on this. You say, I'm currently studying environmental engineering at Oxford University in the UK. As part of the course dissertation, our tutors, you don't highly insist, you insist. All right, or you highly recommend. The students take part, okay, it's subjunctive here, so get rid of the to, in various ongoing environmental conservational programs which are taking place around the city locations during the summer holidays. All right, now what you've got here is you've got a number of phrasal verbs I'd like you to get rid of if you could. So our tutors insist students participate in conservational programs occurring around the city in the summer. You don't clickbait. No. You don't. First of all, no. And then you don't want to sound so informal, like, oh, I just happened upon this. No. So, while I, let's just simplify it a little. I received a notification on LinkedIn for a trainee program at your firm. Again, forget the privileged. During the month of April, I feel, therefore, I could gain valuable experiences by working with your well-reputed organization. Now, here it's okay, but everywhere else we talk about it being privileged and esteemed is just too much. Furthermore, I had worked earlier for Wilkinson, okay, in England during my high school summer holidays. I had worked as a coral reef conservational trainee for 2 months and acquired hands-on experience in maintenance, lowercase m, and planning software programs. Therefore, I feel that these experiences would be an added advantage in acquiring this particular job opportunity. I'd be highly indebted, no, if I were hired to work for this excellent, okay, let's fix this. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to look at some examples of closings for formal letters. All right, this just it's not entirely appropriate. You could have just said something like, I am very eager to work with your institution and further my skills in this area. I look forward to hearing from you soon. And then that's it, okay? So those are some of the suggestions I have for this letter. I know I talked a ton about your task 2, so please take some of those suggestions, try to apply them in your next set of essays, all right? Looking forward to them, so good luck.